Hi, everyone. We are just waiting on getting the attendees in here, so a couple of minutes. I'll wait until the numbers stop increasing just to make sure nobody misses anything. And then all the panelists, you guys can go ahead and turn your cameras on. Just stay muted for now. And then that way everyone can see your lovely faces. Okay, so it looks like the participant number might have stopped, so we'll go ahead and officially get started because I want to be conscious of the time. My name is Danielle Johnson. I currently work as Lead Access Specialist at the Disability Resource Center. Today we have 3 of our students who are going to be answering some questions just to give all of you an idea of what we do at the DRC, how we help students, and then how they have been benefited by the services provided by our office. So I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to go around and have all the panelists introduce themselves, giving their name, their major, their year, and their pronouns. So why don't we start with Emily and then go to Diana and go from there.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Debuscher. I am a 4th year studying industrial engineering and technical writing, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
Hi, I'm Diana. I am in my last year in general engineering, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hi everyone, my name is Jimmy. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a 5th year, hopefully graduating comparative ethnic studies student with minors in Asian studies and Chinese studies.
Great, thank you all so much. And as all the participants can see who are in on our Zoom today, all of the people that are joining us as panelists today are a little bit older. They've been at Cal Poly for a while, so they've got some really good experience. So hopefully they'll be able to answer whatever questions you have. We do have a set of questions we'll be going through, but if you have questions that you want answered as we go ahead and put them in the Q&A board and we'll try to get to them. We actually already got a question from somebody asking if there's a way that Questa documents can be transferred over to Cal Poly. So it would be documents from a disability resource office at a community college. And I know that Diana is somebody that transferred over to Cal Poly from a JC. So Diana, do you want to talk about the process for getting services at Cal Poly after community college?
Yeah, sure, I can talk about that. So I actually had all my screening and documentations already completed. So I didn't actually do the whole screening process when I transferred to Cal Poly. So that was quite seamless for me. What was done was pretty much my DRC at my community college had sent over all the documentation to Cal Poly's DRC, and then everything was pretty much taken care of behind the scenes. So it wasn't too much effort on my end, but then again, this was a few years ago, and my mind was, my memory's not a little fuzzy on all the details, but from what I remember, it wasn't that difficult of a process.
And this is going into one of our questions a little bit, so I'll have you just continue and talk a bit about how was it going from having your services at the community colleges to having services at Cal Poly? Were there difference in your services? Was the process similar? How was that trying to get accommodations continued after junior college?
I want to say I utilized the DRC services at Cal Poly a whole lot more than I did at the community college. I think part of it has to do with the fact that I became more comfortable with accepting the fact that I have a learning disability, and I've learned to accept that having a learning disability does not necessarily mean that you're incapable of achieving your goals and whatever dreams that you may have. And so it's a little bit difficult for me to say that or to compare apple to apple when in fact I didn't utilize the DRC services as much, and I kind of regret that. But from the community that we have here at Cal Poly, it's really helped me to feel empowered, and as well as to help me achieve my goals. And I can't be more grateful to the DRC at Cal Poly It's really the community that I needed, and also it's a community to be a part of if you have these types of challenges. And it's been so supportive, so I can't praise DRC at Cal Poly enough.
Thanks. And so then passing that question on to Emily and Jimmy as well, how was it for you guys transitioning from high school to Cal Poly? And if you used accommodations in high school, what did that look like once you got to Cal Poly using services at Cal Poly versus high school?
I can go. I used some accommodations in high school, but really had those solidified when I started at Cal Poly.
Where is it?
Sorry, I'm dealing with some distractions over here. I had those solidified at Cal Poly and was really able to use some of the more extensive services like testing. When I was in high school, that was kind of more informal and was arranged like professor to professor, but the DRC allowed me to consolidate all of those like accommodations into one, and I've used like the DRC portal to do all of that. I don't know if Jimmy, you have like more experience with high school accommodations, but that's kind of, mine were really informal in high school, and the DRC offered a more like, I guess, structured way to ask for accommodations.
Yeah, in high school, I wasn't aware of any of the types of accommodations that were available. I hadn't gotten tested until probably my third year in college. But I would say that it was a very easy process. Like the people at the DRC made it really easy for like, these are the steps that you take in terms of like submitting paperwork once you do get tested for like things that like accommodations that you think you need, and we'll talk from there in terms of like what are some of the challenges that you have in the classroom, and like these are the things that we can offer you, and let us know what helps. And it's very much like trial and error and like checking in to see if things work, and that was really helpful for me.
Great, thank you guys. Okay, so we got a bunch of questions in online about documentation, and I'm gonna have to probably go ahead and answer most of these ones. So somebody asked about the timeline for submitting documentation to us. So we're pretty quick at turnaround. It's gonna get a little bit slower if you turn in documentation right at the start of the fall quarter. So if you're able to do an intake appointment now, if you're free in your schedule to do your intake now, we definitely recommend doing it early. If you wait until the fall quarter starts, then there can be a delay, you know, a couple of weeks, even 3 weeks sometimes, depending on the situation. So with, you know, submitting the documentation, once we get it in, unless it's a high volume time, within a couple of days, you'll likely get invited to an intake appointment as long as the documentation was sufficient. So I would say like 48 to 72 hours, sometimes even sooner than that. But even if we invite you to an intake in the fall, 2 to 3 days after we get the documentation, it could take several weeks to actually get an appointment with us. So if you really want your, you know, services to start as soon as the school year starts, we recommend doing your appointment for the intake over the summer and just having it, you know, done and out of the way. In terms of transferring over information, you can have that faxed directly from your school. Doesn't always necessarily mean that it's going to be sufficient, but our website has some really good information on what kind of documentation we're looking for each particular type of disability. It really boils down to knowing the severity of the particular, you know, functional limitations that you're dealing with. Of course, if you've attended a school before and received accommodations, then knowing that information is always helpful for us. So one of the easiest ways, if you don't want to go through the, you know, burden of having to get documentation faxed over and go to old providers and things like that, you can just download a form on our website. If you go to our homepage, drc.calpoly.edu, on the right-hand side, there's a list of links. It's for forms. And under that link, there's documentation forms for ADHD, for psych disabilities, mobility impairments, all kinds of things. So that's a really easy way to just have a provider, you know, fill out the information that we need. And let's see what else in that vein of things. High school information is really hit or miss in terms of whether or not it's going to be sufficient for us. If you had a 5 plan in high school, it doesn't necessarily mean there's enough information, documentation we'll receive to extend your services in our setting. So typically using our form is going to be the best way to go, just to make sure we're getting everything that we need, but it's not, necessarily essential. If the application is sufficient, we just won't really know until we look at it. So, and then in terms of actually applying for services, you would do that online. We have basically 2 steps. First step is filling out an application. Second step is submitting documentation, and you can actually submit documentation to that website as you're sending your application. And no, there's not a July 15th deadline. You can apply for services at any time, both prior to starting at Cal Poly and once you've started at Cal Poly. So there's no limit in terms of that. So hopefully that got to most of those questions. There was a bunch. And let's see. All right, so I'm going to try and go through those. So as I'm shuffling through those, why don't we talk about what DRC services you guys have used the most?
I think that I have definitely used the extended test time and modified attendance accommodations the most. My disability is fairly unpredictable, and sometimes getting to class is really difficult, or making it through tests in the allotted time. So extended test services has been extremely helpful, and working with professors to just talk about the limitations that I have and how they can best support me and how I can get through their classes in a way that works for both of us.
I've also utilized the extended test time to help me on exams. I've also utilized the software program called Read Write, and it's been great for certain classes that requires a lot of reading. I just recently took an English class last quarter, and it's been so helpful just going through all the reading assignments, having a software that helps you read the text out loud when you have some processing, information processing challenges. Having software that's able to read back and for you to help you audibly process that material has been such an integral part in my success in that class. So I think just utilizing some software and technology, John Lee is a great asset in helping you to navigate all the different technological resources that the DRC has to offer. So having things like a live scribe pen, it's a device that you can utilize to take notes, and it audio records as well as video records your notes, your handwritten notes, so that when you want to go back in audio and replay what was said during class at that exact moment that you wrote down that note, you can re-experience that at a time that's convenient for you.
Yeah, both of these were already said, but testing has been super, super helpful for me. A lot of the times the issues that I have are not only do I not have enough time taking tests in class, but it's really distracting to watch other people turn in their tests and be done when you're you feel like you've just started the test. So with the DRC, I get time and a half. So whatever the professor allots for all the students to have, I get a little bit of extra time, and getting put into a room where you have less visual distractions. So that's really helpful in terms of focusing. And then like Diana was saying too, I also utilize the live scribe pen, which is something that the DRC provides for you within the time that you're a student. And yeah, it's just really helpful to hear back exactly the words that were said by the professor. And it can be helpful to rewrite your notes if that's something that helps you too.
And the resources that we listed out, it's not an all-encompassing list of all the things that the DRC has to offer. So I encourage you to, talk to the DRC and see what else the DRC can offer you to meet your needs. because everyone's needs are individualized. So it's best to have that one-on-one conversation when you have that opportunity to do that, because the DRC is there to help you.
If you guys want, you can go into the chat function. You could type up some of the software programs or things you're using and just make sure you select to share it with all the participants, the panelists, and the attendees. And then people can visually see in case they're having trouble knowing how to spell things. So we got a couple of questions in about dietary restrictions, which I'm going to go ahead and answer really quick because I'm not sure that this applies to any of you three. So we do accommodate for food allergies, and if you want to use one of the forms from our website, you would use the health impairment form. We consider food allergies to be a health impairment, so we just need evidence, from your doctor showing that you have, a severe or life-threatening allergy. We would need to know if you use an EpiPen, things like that, the extent of the allergy. And then in terms of housing accommodations, we would potentially, provide housing accommodations that can look like a personal microwave, a personal fridge. In some instances, we may need to, limit exposure to other students. It really depends on the situation. So if you do have a food allergy you're concerned about, I definitely recommend applying for services so that we can get started on discussing what your housing needs would be. We do have a lot of students, like somebody here mentioned a severe nut allergy. It's pretty common among students that we work with. So we would just need to explore for your particular type and severity of allergy what you would need in the housing setting, but definitely we can accommodate for that. And then in terms of campus dining, we can do things to modify a student's meal plan. So 805 Kitchen, which is the large dining facility on our campus, can actually do like a chef prepared meal program. So you can actually go and pick up food that's completely allergy free from our allergy free counter. You would basically order ahead of time the quantity of whatever dish you want and then go pick it up. And you can actually work with the campus dietitian to figure out meals. And sometimes they're even able to bring different foods into the campus markets. So for instance, in the past, we've had students who wanted like brown rice English muffins or sunflower seed butter, and Campus Markets was able to bring those items onto campus so that students had access to them. So we work really hard to provide as much food access to students as possible, and it is a really impressive program. And most of our students are pretty like blown away by it because they don't know that it exists until they go through that process of meeting with the dietitian and registering with the DRC. So. Okay, so one person asked about professors and how to notify them about accommodations. So does somebody want to talk about the faculty notification letter?
Sure, I can do that.
Piggybacking off of the faculty notification letter, how has being a DRC student impacted your interactions with professors? And all three of you can go at that one if you want to.
Yeah, so the way that works is the DRC has an preset format for how to notify each professor of your accommodations at the beginning of every quarter. You go into your portal and select the accommodations that you want to notify that specific professor about, and they get an email explaining what those accommodations are and how that's typically applied in a college course. When I send that out, I follow up with a personalized email explaining kind of what's worked in the past for me or how I anticipate my accommodations being applied in that class. For example, one of my classes right now, we don't have any tests, so I didn't need to use the testing accommodation, but I need a note taker for that class. So it's really based on each class. It's a little different with this virtual quarter, but I set up Zoom meetings with each of my professors to talk about specific things in each of their classes. I know it's encouraged that students reach out to the professor in the first week of school in person or like one-on-one, and I found that that's been really helpful. And all of the professors throughout my 4 years here have been really, really great at listening and attending to my needs as a student, and they really truly care about their students. I've had only good experiences with professors.
Yeah, the professor, just going off of what Emily was saying, the professors are very accommodating and understanding. They've encountered, at least from my experience, many students who've gone through the DRC who have special needs or special accommodations that need to be met. in order to succeed in these classes. And so having a pre-filled out form that can be accessed through the DRC student portal, and like what Emily was saying, you usually try to send that out towards the beginning of the quarter to notify the instructors, and that has been very helpful in just limiting the I guess the intimidation and I guess not embarrassment, but just that barrier to notify someone, because sometimes talking about having a challenge can be difficult already as is, and having to put that burden on the individual to express that and let someone else know that can be very scary. But just having that pre-filled out form ready to go, and letting the teachers know, that's been very, very easy and seamless for me. And I guess that's been the experience for many other students too, like Emily has said.
Yeah, for the most part, fortunately, my professors have been like very understanding and stuff. I have had 2 professors who have given me trouble with this. I will wait for a thumbs up to say their names. But yes, there are specific professors. One of them, okay, I will tell a little story. So, being that I took my test like at the physical building of the DRC, there was one professor who, like, it was a huge lecture. They had given like an opportunity, an extra credit opportunity for everyone who was like done with their test early. Like you can like draw a picture and I'll like pick the best one and I'll give them like 1 extra credit point. But that was like not something that was extended to the students who took the test at the DRC. And I had emailed the professor about that, and this was an econ class, so she was like, well, if you think about the cost benefit of, yeah, like it was this whole like mess of things. And I was like, you can't just like take away an opportunity even if it is for extra credit. So that was like the less kind of severe of the situations. I had another situation where this happened to me twice with the same professor, same quarter. I was taking an exam, and usually like you reach out to your professor, like one of the student assistants at the DRC will help to reach out to the professor when you have any questions. And a professor, there was like an hour and a half of a testing session, and I asked the question 10 minutes in and she answered with 1 minute left. So I failed the test. And then the next, during like my final or something, she just like refused to answer any of my questions. And that is pretty sure illegal. So anything that happens like that, try your best to report it right away. Talk to your access specialist, because that's like not allowed and it's not something to be tolerated. Like it's important like to know that anything that happens in that range, like you are absolutely allowed to like report that and like have people walk you through that process. There's also something called a bias incident report that you can also fill out and have anyone you know like help you fill that out, because like that's not acceptable at all. But for the most part, again, all of my professors have been like really, really good, and it's especially helpful if you like email them in advance and just say like, hey, I just sent over my like DRC letter to you. Let me know if you got it, or if like you have any like questions for me, or if we should talk about it. But yes.
So yeah, and I mean, 99% of the professors are awesome, but I think the thing is that if you go into a situation where there is bias or discrimination, it hurts a lot, and that's why it can seem so, profound in that moment. But the DRC access specialists actually are considered mandated reporters for disability discrimination. So if a student were to confront an incident with an instructor where they felt that they were being discriminated against, we actually would report that to the Office of Equal Opportunity, and they could potentially start an investigation on all of that. So we do take it really, really seriously. In terms of responsibilities, I mean, the DRC students and faculty really need to work together to make sure that students are being adequately and properly accommodated. So where we are approving the accommodations and basically providing a list of what those accommodations are, professors also have to help to ensure that the accommodations are able to be used in their class. So if there's any challenges with that, the access specialists would work with the instructor and the student to make sure that the student is getting accommodated in the ways that are needed for that particular individual. Okay, so somebody asked about priority registration, and I know at least one of you has that. I think maybe Emily has it. Do either of the other do you have? Okay. So Emily, if you feel comfortable, do you want to talk about why you were approved for priority registration? If you even remember.
Yeah, sure. There's a few reasons. One of them was I had a pretty severe injury and I needed to be able to schedule my classes as close together as possible so I would minimize the amount of times I had to walk home in a day. I wanted to schedule my classes closer together on campus because I had some mobility issues pop up due to the injury. The other thing is I don't know if I remember if there was anything further that got me those, but there were certain times of the day that I knew that were really bad for me learning wise. So I knew I couldn't take any classes like in the 1 to 2 p.m. slot because that was when kind of after lunch and it was hard for me to pay attention after that. So the priority registration allowed me to build a schedule that worked for my health needs. Is there anything else, Danielle, that you remember priority registration for me?
You hit on quite a few that were helpful, and I'll kind of cover some others that might be relevant. So not every DRC student is approved for special exception status in the registration. Obviously, out of our 3 panelists here, only 1 is approved, and quite a lot of our DRC students are not approved. The majority, in fact, are not approved. But where we would approve it is if a student has specific timing needs in a day because of their disability. So like one example, like Emily said, if a student has a physical, injury or mobility impairment, more permanent mobility impairment, they may need to space out classes just so they have enough time to get from class to class, to get around campus and not be in pain or to not further injure themselves. Some of our students might have severe mood disorders and it's very difficult to get up in the morning to wake up, and they might have a history of missing, early morning classes during that 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock hour. So we might push back their schedule so they're starting a little bit later. Students with diabetes might have various parts of the day where their blood sugar is fluctuating. Students with different types of IBD, inflammatory bowel diseases, might need bathrooming at certain points during the day where their symptoms are flaring. So really it can vary. We may also approve it for ongoing appointments that a student has every week off campus or even in their hometowns, and you take a Monday or a Friday off every week to go see a provider out of the area. So it really varies. There is a process for applying for that particular accommodation, and it is a little bit more sort of serious in terms of our consideration level, just because we want to make sure that when we are providing it to students, it's because of equal access, equitable access, and making sure that the student really needs that in order to be successful as a student in the Cal Poly environment. So hopefully that covers that question. And then we got another question that I wanted to address live about the Department of Rehabilitation. And I'm not sure how many of you work with the DOR. Who works with the DOR? None of you.
I started a little bit there.
You started a little bit, okay. A little bit enough to be able to talk about the process, or no?
I met with a representative and she walked me through all of the possible resources there, and we ended up deciding that it wasn't the perfect fit for me at the time that I was trying to get those services, but I know that they provide options for financial support and equipment and stuff like that. But Danielle, I never realized that, finished that.
Okay, so just generally for those who are not familiar with the Department of Rehabilitation, the DOR is essentially like a combination of the DRC and career services outside of the college environment. So it's providing vocational support for individuals with disabilities for once they've graduated from college, but it provides certain things while they're in college to get to the point of when they're out of college. So you can actually start services with them in high school. You would go in with some kind of vocational plan. So if you're planning on studying architecture and your vocational goal is to be an architect, you would essentially be on a caseload with the DOR until the point where you become employed as an architect down the road. So they can provide things like tuition support if you have financial need. They can help with things like ergonomic equipment at home if you're going to be on your computer a lot and need a particular type of chair or mouse or keyboard. They can provide assistance with books. They can provide funding for wardrobe once you're hired for a position. So they can do a lot of things to sort of facilitate eventual employment for a student once they've graduated. And in terms of our relationship with the DOR, we actually have a counselor who comes to our office every month, and she will meet with our students. So there is a lot of crossover in terms of DRC students and DOR students. So I'm actually a rehabilitation counselor myself by training, and my husband is a rehabilitation counselor here in San Luis Obispo and in Santa Maria. So he's a good contact person. We have a very close relationship with offices here in Santa Maria. So we can definitely help facilitate contact with them if that's something that an incoming student is interested in sort of transferring their case over to one of our offices. Okay, so somebody asked about the separate testing center and extra time on tests. So do you guys want to speak to what the testing center is like on campus?
Sure, I can start us off. The testing center actually got expanded this past quarter, I want to say. So we have a bigger room. So what they look like essentially is a pretty big room with dividers, with like wall dividers. So it's almost like a cubicle that you're sitting in, and it's very quiet. And there's usually a white noise machine or machine that produces white noise. And you have the option of also bringing in little timers, and then you have your extended time or whatever accommodation that you typically need. I sometimes opt for limited distractions, so there's another separate room with less people in there, and that's been very helpful too for me. Also, in certain testing situations where a computer is needed too as well, that's one of my accommodations, to also have a computer to help me take my exam. That's also available depending on if your exam calls for it and if your teacher also requires a use of a computer. So that's kind of been my experience of the testing room, if that's also what you, Emily and Amy, can also expand on.
I can talk a little bit more about it. The testing rooms at the DRC are obviously the best that are on campus. During finals, there's overflow testing, and DRC staff work amazingly well to convert rooms in the UU and other places to accommodate the large numbers of test takers during finals. And they try to mimic exactly what's in the DRC by giving students enough space and keeping it extra quiet, and having like large clocks around and timers and stuff like that. So, but Diana, you touched on, you know, all of the benefits that I have also received through the testing center.
Yeah, y'all both pretty much like covered it. But in terms of like scheduling your tests, you're supposed to do it 7 days in advance. It's been a while, but you're supposed to do it in advance just so that your professor has enough time to also send the physical copy of the test if that's what's happening. Sending the physical copy to the DRC, and just letting like the DRC know like maybe they need a calculator for this, or if this is like an open book test, letting them know what materials that they can use on the test too. But yeah, nothing else really to add.
In some classes, often there'll be like a quiz at the beginning of class, and I found that the easiest way to use my testing accommodations for quizzes is arranging that pretty soon on in the quarter with the professor. Sometimes instead of having you run to the DRC to take your quiz and then come back, the professor will arrange for you to arrive to the classroom early and start to use your time before class even starts. So then you finish your quiz at the same time as the rest of the class. I've also had professors have me take quizzes early in their office hours, earlier in the week, and that has helped too. So you're not running back and forth across campus, just taking quizzes, because that's that's a little too much for somebody to handle just to use accommodations.
I also want to add that if you have classes that are back to back or in-person classes that are back to back, sometimes there's a little bit of an accommodation there to space out the back-to-backness of having extended time and then having it bleed into the next exam. That can be very exhausting on the student itself. So I've ran into that situation, and they try to squeeze in the exam time as close as possible, just to ensure fairness for everyone. But also the DRC is quite reasonable. I also want to add that since this quarter is virtual, it's a good, well, I want to say that in this virtual setting, DRC accommodation is still possible too. The process to ask for accommodation on exam is a little bit different this quarter because again, we're not doing it in person, but we do still send out that same notification to the instructors. And from my classes, what they've done is they've extended the time on this platform called Canvas, which is where a lot of our classes are hosted on. And so that's just, it hasn't really been much of a problem. But I assume that for all virtual online classes for future quarters, something similar might happen. I mean, just extending that time. I'm not sure how that's going to work in the future, but I'm just assuming that it's something along those lines will happen and that there still is going to be accommodations applied in online settings.
Yeah, there's not a perfect method like using Canvas or using Polylearn to extend testing time. Then we'll work with the instructor to figure out a way to accommodate a student so that they're getting, you know, equivalent access to whatever the assignment or exam is. So it is a little bit trickier and sort of a more unique process, I would say, in the virtual quarter. But, you know, the longer we are in a virtual quarter, the more sort of familiar with things we'll get and professors will get. So but just because it is virtual, students are still entitled to getting whatever services they need based on their, you know, particular functional limitations. So, all right, so we got a question about tutoring. One of the questions I had was actually about tutoring. So for those of you who have used free tutoring on campus, what tutoring have you used and what's been helpful?
The tutoring services, at least for the College of Engineering, got merged with the tutoring services for the whole campus. So I think it's just this year's been quite unique in the sense where the school itself had tried to collectively pull all the services into one hub, and they actually moved all the services to the library. That's been a little bit challenging for me as I used to be able to access the College of Engineering individual tutoring services, which they call, I think, the Kind Success. Or correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, I forgot what it's called, but there's just like a separate tutoring service for engineering students. And I used to pop in there and just on a drop-in basis, and that's been quite nice. But as this new hub of tutoring services has been pulled into this one virtual space, it's gotten better, and there are kinks along the way from last quarter and fall as well, but it's gotten better in the virtual setting, at least from my perspective. Oh, I also want to add, I believe the EOP and other programs have their own tutoring services, but I'm not too sure. I'm not part of the EOP, but I do know that the EOP had their own tutoring services. I am part of the multicultural engineering program, and they used to have their own tutoring services. So that was something I utilized in the past years. But that has been merged into this hub of tutoring services, which they call the Writing and Success Center. You can find all your tutoring services, writing, English, math, science, and what have you. And there are these things called study sessions, where I think lower division classes have these, I think like an hour seminar or hour activity section. It's optional, but it's meant to supplement your courses, and it's I don't quite know if they are moderated by the instructors, if the instructors provide supplemental documents or problems for us to work on in these study sessions. But study sessions are optional and they're a great asset to learning and solidifying the material that's taught in class. So those are some of the things that I've been a part of. But again, it's not all encompassing, experience of all the tutoring services that are out there. This is just all that I know of off the top of my head.
Yeah, and if you look up the Writing and Learning Center online, there's a listing of free tutoring resources on campus, as well as a link to setting up those study sessions. And then students are also able to sign up for supplemental workshops for various, I think it's typically STEM classes. So that would be a course that meets to sort of do work in addition to a class that you're enrolled in. So if you're taking like Math 118, for instance, you do the 1 unit supplemental workshop and you meet once a week, just sort of review information, get extra support in those classes where it might be, a greater challenge to be successful. So anybody else have any comments on supplemental workshops or study sessions, tutoring?
I had awesome experiences in the free study sessions. When I was taking Calc and Physics my first year, they probably are why I passed the class. So yeah, they were great.
And those study sessions are often led by students who've taken those classes, and some of those students are actually grad students. Sometimes some students are just upper, they're in the upper division courses. So some may be grad students, some may not be grad students, but regardless, they're all adequately informed and aware of the content that they're teaching.
Thank you. Okay, so we got a question about residential learning communities and quiet study spaces, and that kind of fits in with one of the questions that I had, which is how much time should a student put into studying each day? What kind of systems do you guys use to keep organized and on top of your studying? And then where do you go to do your studying? And if you can answer the piece about learning communities too, which, maybe there are quieter ones than others, you can speak to that, but I know that that may vary depending on who lives in each hall each year.
Yeah, I can't speak too much necessarily on learning communities, so hopefully someone else can cover that. But in terms of like study spaces, I find that I like to rotate every quarter where I go to study because I end up getting like bored with the location, or like that location becomes too familiar to me and I can't focus there anymore. But usually I go through a rotation of there are quiet rooms in the University Union. So those are like super, super quiet and people will like not let you stay there if you're loud. So it's a really good like quiet study space if that's what you want. If you like background noise, so in the library, like every floor has a different noise level. So the higher you go up, like the less noise you're supposed to make. So you can kind of decide like where that works for you. Typically, group work and stuff is done on the second and third floor, but there are still spaces that you can go to. There's like little cubicles that can help like block off visual distractions if that's something that can be helpful for you, but also if you like background noise, or Baker Science is really good. They have like a lot of different tables that you can do group work at, or like study spaces with outlets. Those are good. In terms of staying organized and stuff, I like to make to-do lists. Sometimes it's good when they're physical because it feels good to like cross things out. But also having like a calendar is really helpful for me. And I like to block in like, this is my study time for this class, this is my break time, my meal time. And even if I don't follow it to a T, that's okay. But I like to have like a guided day. And it's nice too with your Cal Poly email because you automatically have access to Outlook calendars, so that you can use that whole calendar system. I recommend it over Google Calendar. Google Calendar is really good and I used to use it for a while, but Outlook is really nice because you can also check out other people's schedules. So like if maybe you have a group project and you can check out when you're all free at the same time and like schedule like a little time to study together or do a project, and you can check out like your professor's office hours and stuff like that. So that's kind of why I like to use Outlook. So Outlook and rotating your study space is what I would recommend.
I think I rotate my study space a little different. I like to have a different place for each of my classes, because then, okay, 4th floor of the library, that's where I'm going to do physics. Can do English on my couch because I like to read there, kind of just separating those spaces. Something that I found really helpful is not doing homework I like to separate work and relaxation, so not doing homework like in my room if that's possible, because I want that space to be separated from just my schoolwork. I need it to have a clear line there. As far as places on campus, I worked in the library for a very long time, and I like right here, it's behind me right now, I like this corner of the 4th floor. And then Baker also has awesome spaces like Jimmy, you were saying. And then as far as off campus, some of the coffee shops, if you like ambient noise, close that you can walk to from campus are really nice. So I know Scout is close, and I think Black Horse is pretty accessible if you're living on campus. So just those other places to kind of separate your dorm room from where you're studying.
I think Emily and Jenny gave very good advice on how to navigate just on a day-to-day basis and how to navigate your study time. I think this is very applicable in virtual studying too, just having a schedule, having a set of routine, having a designated space to do one thing and to do another thing. To touch on learning communities, as a transfer student, I never really found much of a community, or I mean, at least other than like Connections Club, which is something that's also that's provided by the DRC, or at least if that's in conjunction with the DRC. But in terms of learning community, there's something in terms of transfer students. There's a new transfer center that's just been open, at least before the shutdown. That's where transfer students can collectively go and do their work. So it's like a workspace just for transfer students. I haven't had the privilege to check that space out yet because it barely just opened a few weeks before the whole campus was shut down. But just know that there is a space for transfer students there. In terms of a quiet space, it's just something I like. There is a quiet room on the 1st floor in the library. There's a 24-hour floor in the library where you can access the library at any time of the day. Maybe studying at a time where everyone's there at the library might be a little overwhelming, which is something I find is very challenging for me at times. So sometimes I study at an off time, like or I study when people are not typically there, so less congested time. And how I study and organize myself, that's honestly something I've been struggling with. I still work at that every day. But what I found that has worked for me is I have like a wall where I put Post-its of different classes and I color coordinate. So I'm able to visually see on my wall what's due, what's due for certain classes, and what's coming up. So I like to kind of look at my schedule on a weekly basis rather than on a daily basis. That's really kind of overwhelming for me. So seeing things on a holistic view gives me more of a chance to kind of balance out and accommodate and make room for time in my schedule. And I also schedule in time for fun. So, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we're down to our last minute here. So I just really quickly want to let you all know that Don Lee, our assistive technology specialist, is going to be doing a little tech demo immediately following this. He posted the link in the chat, so you'll need to scroll up and there should be a Zoom meeting link that you can copy and paste to join in on that. I also posted a couple of links just now in the chat panel for attendees. So one of them is Getting Good Grades with Gadgets, and that's a website link where you can look at different apps, technology that could be helpful for studying. But John is also available to do one-on-one appointments with students. There he is now. So you're always welcome to meet with John to go over different types of technology that can help with studying. And then Connections is our social support network, and there's also a link for Connections. So hopefully we got to answer everybody's questions. If you need to contact me, I'll put my email in the chat box, but otherwise, thank you all for coming, and panelists, you can go ahead and stop your videos.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
y'all.